Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here from the SoonerScoop.com studios in Norman, America. A little bit of a fake spring outside. Josh McCutcheon down in the Houston HQ. How's the weather down in Houston? Welcome back to a recruiting report here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.
Pretty solid, Eddie. Obviously, I don't know what it's like up there in Oklahoma, but for Houston, they all think this is cold, and it's in the mid 60s. So I'm walking around in t-shirt and flip flops. I'm loving it.
Go ahead.
I think to say what you were probably going to say, I'm pretty much in my heaven. This is my perfect world where it's in the 60s and low 70s all the time.
Nothing better than a little bit of spring. Nothing better than patio season opening, sunroof season opening as well. But not a whole lot of stuff going on. We're kind of in that middle period where, winter workouts are going on. You got spring football just kind of within grasping distance. That should be getting started down in Norman here in a couple weeks. I would think the first or second week of March is probably when they're going to start spring football. Obviously, got the spring game coming up on April 20th. We'll talk about another big recruiting weekend coming up on March 9th for Oklahoma. But first things first, there's been a little bit of movement within the recruiting offices, and I think that's a good place to start. Director of Player Personnel and Recruiting J.R. Sandlin headed to SMU, as reported by Matt Zenitz on Monday. And, Josh, I think that there's a lot of people out there that probably don't know the ins and outs of what how a recruiting office is structured. You had J.R. Sandlin leaving. You also had Lee Davis leaving for Central Florida about a month ago. I think it was somewhere time during the middle of December, January, maybe, if I'm remembering correctly. Yep. But they've made a couple hires. It sounds like they're making a couple hires just in terms of what that is. Let's start with J.R. Sandlin's role just in terms of what is a director of player personnel and recruiting?
Yeah, with that sort of situation and DPPs, you're going to have different variations on how you're going to do that. Some guys are going to be strictly, your current roster, how it's going to look once you add what you've recruited. Guys that are going to be very aware of what's happening in the portal, the rumors, whatever it may be. Kind of almost personnel guys without really being involved in the recruiting. But obviously with J.R. Sandlin, that was not the case. He was a very active recruiter, very engaged in that. I would say specifically on the offensive side of the ball is where I heard his name come up a lot. That's not to say that defensively there wasn't. I'm sorry, I've got that reversed. Defensively, he was very engaged. Offensively, I think some of the same things maybe fell to Drew Hill at times. But, I think Oklahoma kind of split some of those duties sometimes. But this is a guy that you would see at camp, and Eddie, George, I know you guys saw him too. He'd be right there with Brent Venables. Sure. Wherever Brent was going, he had his list. He's running the names. Okay, this is the cornerbacks group. This is the guys, number 112, 243, and 157. Those are the guys that we're looking at, that kind of thing. And then having the context to say, okay, here are the guys. And JR is like and guys in that role are very much I'm gonna throw in a reference that no one's expecting. Kind of for anyone that maybe has seen The Devil Wears Prada, there's a scene where the famous magazine, it's Meryl Streep playing the role, and she can't remember who someone is, and she has these two assistants, and it's basically their job to say, hey, that's this person and his girlfriend, or that's this person and his daughter, or whatever it may be. That's kind of what J.R. Sandlin's doing. Like, he's making sure Brent talks to mom and dad, or Brent talks to the uncle who brought him on the visit, or his trainer, whoever it may be. That job is to know all those people, know who they are, put Brent, in position to both know what he's talking about and be as engaging as he can be, because he has the information he needs. So those guys do a lot of behind the scenes, a lot of information collecting, and really trying to boil it down to a point where, whether it's Brent Venables, whether it's a position coach, they know what they need to know so they can kind of move forward.
George, how many stars did you give Devil Wears Prada? I did not.
It's a pretty good movie. 3.5 out of 5 stars is what I would probably give it, somewhere in there. Anne Hathaway's in it. She's the main actress. She's very good. Love Anne Hathaway. What I was going to say, though, before Eddie interrupted me, talking about a movie he probably hasn't seen.
I said I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Guaranteed he hasn't.
I saw 101 Dalmatians.
That's a good movie too. That's a 4 out of 5 stars. But anyways, what I was gonna say is I think it's interesting. He's going to SMU. We've talked about SMU on here before. They're moving to the ACC. They're becoming a Power 4 team as this thing moves to 4 conferences. And he's getting that assistant AD and general manager type title. So I would assume this is some sort of an upgrade for him in terms of a bigger position. I think when he first got to OU, he was getting paid $100,000, which isn't a ton of money, but obviously he had somewhat of a big role. But Josh, it feels like this is a pretty replaceable, and we'll get into how they're going to replace or what that role looks like moving forward. But this isn't, look, J.R. Sandlin, like you said, he was attached to the hip at Brent at times. He did a lot of important things, but this isn't some job that is like irreplaceable, right?
No, and you have to remember that this isn't a guy that, we know so many of these guys knew Brent beforehand. Todd Bates came with him, Miguel Chavis came with him, and even within some of the support staff, guys like Ryan Carter and some of those names that we know came along. The JR was just a guy that I think Brent saw a similar ideology to. JR's very active on social media, was long before Oklahoma, will obviously continue to be now. For those who are following him, you make your decisions going forward how you want to handle that. But there are I don't think it was anything where Brent put this overwhelming amount of faith in him and now he's going to have to try to rebuild a relationship or create a relationship with someone else. He's going to do exactly what he did with JR, find a guy that he thinks see things the way he does and how you build a locker room, how you build a team, and go about it in that way. Because, again, that's part of it, too, is JR's talking to people and having conversations, or, and I keep saying JR, but I just mean a DPP, Director of Player Personnel, whoever that may be. You want that person to see things the way you do and understand, okay, these are the traits we're looking for when we're talking to his head coach, when we're talking to his, his family, whoever it may be. These are the things we're looking for, and these are the things that we say, okay, that's a red flag for us. That's probably not what we want to be a part of this program. So it sounds like we're kind of down on Jaron. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I think it's a role that is designed, frankly, to be fairly easy to turn over, because there's just going to be situations like this where guys move a little more freely than a coaching staff because the money's very different.
And you still have Drew Hill on staff.
Sure.
And he's been around now for almost a decade, right? So
I'd be one of the longest tenured guys down in Norman now, with all the the staff turnover and everything that's happened over the last couple of years. The second part of J.R. Sandlin's title, general manager of or football general manager for SMU, that is a term that is coming up more and more in college athletics. And I think that when you start looking at the structuring of the way that the NIL movement has kind of made its turn in the world of college football, I guess I saw Sam Kahn wrote an article about it. I want to say back in September of 2023, this last football season, how the prevalence of the general manager, just in terms of what that is within a football program, is being seen more and more. It would seem that Oklahoma, and I'll get to Kerry Murdoch put some reporting and information up on kind of what OU kind of sees this position as in terms of replacing J.R. Sandlin. But just for you guys, just in general, I think that there's a lot of people, and we'll probably get into a little bit more of this on the podcast this week on the Unofficial 40 when Kerry joins us. But the general manager for a college football program, what is that? I think is kind of like the basic question that a lot of people have.
Well, I think it's, and Josh, you can cut in if you want, but I think it's different for different schools, right? And I think a lot of people view it from the outside thinking, oh, it's like an NFL general manager and they're negotiating contracts and they're talent evaluators. And maybe that's the case for some of these schools, but I think for some of these other schools, it's just looking at the overall picture of the program. And I think that's kind of the direction that Oklahoma's going to head with that type of position. And they haven't officially hired anybody for that. I know there's been some reporting out there, and you should go check out Soonerscoop.com and kind of what Kerry wrote on there. But OU hasn't really – they're still trying to figure out how to do this because there's a lot of violations, NCAA violations that you have to try and avoid, and negotiating NIL and the school employees and all that goes into that. So I think it's different for every school, but what you're seeing is these programs wanting to hire somebody, usually from the outside, maybe from somebody from the inside, that can come in and evaluate talent, evaluate your roster from player 1 to 100 and whatever, however big your roster is, what they're worth, where they can fit in, who to recruit, who not to recruit, both in the portal as well as in the high school ranks. So I think it's different, and I don't think people need to look at it as just like an NFL GM. It's a totally different situation for a lot of programs.
Yeah, I mean, because it's going to matter as far as what your personnel staff size is going to be, what your, payroll looks like. I mean, if you can segment off several different jobs, there's no reason to give a guy that, that general manager role and give him 6 different jobs. If you can say, okay, for us, and I think this is what my understanding of what Oklahoma wants us to be is kind of like a chief of staff, like almost a guy that's going to keep things off Brent's plate, let him do, that person's going to do a lot of the day-to-day stuff and kind of like what I was talking about earlier, in that a guy that they really trust and a guy that knows how Brent wants things done, how he wants it organized, how he wants things kind of orchestrated, I guess would be the best way to say it. While other people, like George is saying, are absolutely, the GM is a personnel guy, and I don't mean from a, who's in the coaching office, but I mean, how have we constructed this roster? And that's, again, it's just 2 ways to go about it differently. What I do think is that Oklahoma's going to have, whether the person that comes in and is named Oklahoma's general manager is a true personnel player guy, I don't think it really matters, because Oklahoma's going to put other guys in place who do know how to do that, who do know how to evaluate and look and find information on the players that Oklahoma's trying to bring in. So people that might respond to whoever is going to be hired and say, "Oh, that's not what we were thinking of." We were wanting, Ron Wolf from the Green Bay Packers. Like, no, it doesn't have to be like that kind of setup. It's just about how you want to do it, how you want to divvy up the jobs. And I think Oklahoma is, like a lot of things we've seen, taking a little different approach to it than maybe some other schools.
Certainly don't want Jerry Jones as your general manager. I think Cowboys fans have learned that here over the last, 2 decades. So the one thing that we do know about this, and Kerry put up a report on the Crimson Corner last night informing subscribers kind of about just the idea of what Oklahoma wants to be able to do with this open position or positions. We can fairly confidently say that Curtis Lofton will be a part of this in some form or fashion, whether that be with an assistant general manager tag next to his name. There's still a lot to be worked out, as well as Woody Glass, who currently, as you kind of pointed out, a chief of staff. That is his official title right now in Norman under Brent Venables.
Yeah, guys, do we have to just stop and give Kerry a little credit for not only doing a nice job with the reporting, but not starting a fight while he did it? I'm very proud of Kerry in this moment. But
I just heard the door
guys,
slam. He might be headed out.
We know, that is like I said, with Brent, I think he has just unique ideas on how he wants all of these staffers to be organized and how they're going to operate and all these sort of things. I think from what I can gather, what I see, and you guys can absolutely weigh in and tell me if you see it differently, but when I look at it, it seems like he wants guys to have a very specific role. Like, this is what you do, and I don't want you to worry about a lot else. Like, I want you doing this day in, day out, 8 hours a day. This is where or 12, whatever it may be. This is where I want your focus, and not he's going to do 12 different jobs and not really do any of them as well as I want him to. So to me, that's my impression of how Brent sees the support staff being built. And I think maybe if people think of it in that way, it might make it a little easier to understand kind of what the path is going forward here.
And I think these are 2 guys that he clearly trusts, right? So when you talk about the Woody Glass and Curtis Lofton, obviously Curtis played for him. Woody has worked alongside him for a long time and is very familiar with the football department. What exactly those 2 guys will be doing, I'm sure we'll find out at some point down the line. But I think this goes back to the bigger picture of even going back to the hire of Zach Alley, and that's allowing Brent Venables to just be a football coach. And you look across the landscape of college football right now, and you're seeing some college coaches jump to go to the NFL because they're tired of dealing with NIL or the transfer portal or whatever. Hiring people that Brent trusts, people that can evaluate talent, can do all the kind of minutiae details, the day-to-day stuff that Josh was talking about, while he can just go coach football, I think only makes Brent Venables a better football coach. So I think that's kind of the takeaway for me is I don't know what the titles are going to be officially. I'm sure we'll find that out at some point during the spring here. But none of that really matters. What matters to me is that, okay, they're freeing up Brent to allow him to go do what he does best, and that's coach football.
And certainly we'll be getting to that portion with spring ball coming right up. I do want to say that Oklahoma has made a hire that you had confirmed, George, I believe on Friday of last week. Is that correct? Or
it was yesterday.
Was it yesterday?
Yeah, Monday.
Well, Tuesday's soccer. It is what it is. I'm thinking about going outside. Jolie Ali, I think is how you pronounce the last name. She will be coming in to replace Lee Davis, who we talked about at the beginning of the program, headed over to Central Florida, a place I believe that she had worked with Gus Malzahn. I think that they had a little bit of a history as well. Jolie Ali, though, she's going to be the on-campus recruiting coordinator for Oklahoma, has experience within the college football world, worked for Utah from 21 to 22, worked for USC while going to school in Los Angeles. Josh, just in terms of on-campus recruiting coordinator, how would you define that position? I think that there's a lot of people, this is another thing where that's within the recruiting offices that everybody kind of knows the name. They see the tweets out on, on X or wherever on social media, but they don't really know exactly what that position is responsible for.
Yeah, and this is another organizational position in a lot of ways. Now, don't get me wrong; like they are planning the junior day weekends, sure, and they're making sure the guys are having fun and kind of timing out. Like, okay, we need 45 minutes here. We're going to spend an hour here. Like, there's a lot of that, but at the same time, they're trying to make sure it's fun and the guys have a good, positive experience, which I think we can all look at how well OU's recruited over the last few years and say that that's probably been pretty successful. I think they've done Lee Davis did a nice job. When I say organizational, though, where J.R. Sandlin's doing a lot of work with the players themselves and kind of, making sure that's all organized and the coaches know what they need to be doing, that kind of thing. With a staffer like this, it's more about what the coaches are up to. Okay, coach, you've got to go see this guy on Tuesday. We've got a flight out for you here. Okay, we're doing this. Okay, this guy's coming in to see us on Wednesday. Coach Venables will actually be at a speaking function, but we're going to have this, and this for him to kind of keep him around, and maybe coach will get back in time. Just kind of making sure everything is moving and trying to coordinate what we all know is chaos. I mean, it is with guys showing up on campus, with an hour's notice. I mean, these kind of things happen all the time. And these are the people that have to find a way to make it as useful a visit as it can be, even though Oklahoma didn't have time to lay out the full red carpet and do some of those things. So again, it's very much almost a fire catcher at times. Like they are just trying to keep everybody moving, and it's a tricky job at times. But again, it's also one where there's a lot of upward movement. I mean, again, Lee Davis now, associate athletic director or assistant athletic director or something like that at UCF. So there's a lot of growth potential from it. But these often women, I'll just say women because that's often who fills these roles. It's a very labor-intensive job.
I'd just also say that, like, in terms of you get those official visits, and we've talked about big official visit weekends in Norman or wherever. They have a staff underneath them that helps with the recruiting department, but kind of a figurehead, if you will, in terms of setting up all the everything that you see that from a social media aspect, when a player gets to a room and they have all the, the cookie cake, I think that has become, kind of infamous with Oklahoma fans or whatever. that's all coming from the recruiting department. And usually the on-campus recruiting coordinator is somebody that is in charge of that.
It's almost like a wedding planner is a good way to maybe describe it. Like they are kind of behind the scenes, making sure everything goes right on the big day. Whether that's, junior day or the spring game or they're in for official visits, whatever it is. And I think her background too, I mean, I know she worked for Utah and USC, so she kind of understands the college ranks, but even working in community relations with the Chargers, that's a role that you're often working every single, community event and making sure guys are there, building relationships with players, and making sure that they're having fun at these big events that are usually for the fans or somewhere in the community. So clearly she's done that at a pretty high level. I mean, especially to do it for an NFL organization and in terms of planning events and those sorts of things. I think that she'll be a good fit. I don't know much about her other than that, but just looking at her background, she's obviously a young person as well, which I think you typically see younger people in that type of position. So I think it's probably a good fit.
No doubt. And she's going to have to get to work here pretty soon because Oklahoma does have a couple of junior days coming up. The next one, I believe, Josh, March 9th.
Yeah, that's correct.
What kind of just early, it's obviously early, February 20th. I guess maybe not too early in terms of all the visits that are getting scheduled over the spring period here, as you will see that kind of ramp up. People getting out to, spring ball practices, getting to, spring games. Obviously, Oklahoma's coming up on April 20th. Figured you'd be busy that day, George. But it will be, she's going to be busy nonetheless. March 9th, what kind of visitor list already are you looking at for Oklahoma?
Yeah, there already is a strong feel on this one. This is going to be really 2026 heavy for those that these numbers, especially this time of year, get very jumbled. This is the upcoming juniors, guys that will be heading into their junior season in the 2024 high school year. So you're basically, at this point, you can pretty much think of them as juniors because the seniors are gone. So, you've got names like Jonathan Hatton, OU's running back commitment from Cibolo Steel. He'll be up. It's his first time up this spring, so that'll be a really good thing for OU. Big physical back, a lot of fun. Really a guy that was really fun to watch kind of through his sophomore year. Steel, for those that don't know, big-time program in the San Antonio area. And was a guy that I swear, like 1 week it would be like 8 carries for 72 yards. And you're like, I guess he's just kind of working in with other backs. And then next week it'd be 22 carries for 230 yards. And you're like, I don't know what's happening here, but it just kind of was funny to watch his numbers as the way they fluctuated. But this is a top 50, top 75 guy in the country, big time running back. Reminds me a little bit of Jonathan Stewart, if you guys remember from Oregon, the Panthers, just a very, very talented physical back. He's going to be joined by another big-time running back that OU has offered, Caden Jones from Jinx, obviously Kiwan's son. So that's obviously a really good start for OU. But I would say the guy, if I was going to pick one of these 2026 guys that's probably going to end up the most highly rated, we're going to go back to Houston for a kid named Williams that plays safety, but it's Isaiah Williams rather than Jonah Williams. Isaiah is from Missouri City, Fort Bend Marshall, a program that I remember going to when I first moved to Houston, and they were just kind of getting going and had a really great coach. Another guy named Williams, James Williams, is their head coach, and was just starting to build some momentum. Now they are just churning out, multiple Power 5 guys every year. The name that I think people will remember is Devin Achane. He is a Fort Bend Marshall product. Obviously had a great year with the Dolphins, great career at Texas A&M, explosive back. Isaiah is a guy that's listed as like a corner for us at On 3. Guys, he's 6'2", 205, and I'm not even saying he couldn't play corner, but he is a big physical dude, will play safety. Another guy that Brandon Hall has really built a great relationship with. So I really like the starting pieces, and you're going to see some 2025 guys in there too. Tay Harris, the 2025 corner from Georgia, that was one of Zach Alley's first offers once he got to OU. That's another one that I'm kind of expecting to be in that weekend. So there will be some of the upcoming senior class, but it's largely going to be the term that people like to use, the rising juniors, to kind of to really get started and start laying the groundwork for 2026.
It makes me feel so old that we're talking about 2026 guys. In terms of Nate Roberts, Chad Simmons from On3 had done some reporting, previously this week that he will be making the trip up to Ohio State's spring game on April 13th. The next week after his trip to Columbus, he'll be in Norman for Oklahoma's spring game on April 20th. It kind of seems like it more and more, those are the two common names that continue to come up when talking about the 2025 tight end out of Washington, Oklahoma.
Yeah, you can't rule out Oregon. I would throw that in there as well, but I would agree that if the decision wasn't Ohio State or Oklahoma, I'd be pretty surprised. I think it's going to come down to those two. And, I had somebody ask me in our board chat that's still ongoing right now as we record this, where I thought Oklahoma's tight end room, or what that class was going to look like in 25. And I think it's Trinae Washington, who they've already got from Carl Albert, who's more of a flex tight end kind of guy. And I think it'll be Nate Roberts. And I know people right now would call that crazy. And I even put in my answer that it will not surprise me if Nate Roberts commits to Ohio State between now and signing day. I mean, he is very, very high on Ohio State. There's no question. He's built an outstanding relationship with the tight ends coach there. And I think that is really driving a lot of this. So Oklahoma has ground to make up. But again, the things to remember, obviously we all know the proximity from Washington to Norman. That's for a much better and more in shape person than me, that's an easy run. Like that can be done on foot.
I've done it.
Secondarily, what was that?
I've done it.
Yeah, I know you have, Eddie. I know you have. And secondarily, something that gets overlooked is not just that Jake, his older brother, is now on OU's roster, but Jake's head coach, who recruited him to North Texas, is now Oklahoma's offensive coordinator in Seth Luttrell. That is not to be understated. That's a guy the family trusts. They know him. Like there's just a lot of familiarity there that I think over time can win out. But I almost think this is a situation where the appeal of getting out from home is kind of exciting to Nate. I wonder if that holds up over time. We'll see. Neither choice should be surprising to anyone. I think both schools have a very good chance. But if I said Nate committed tomorrow, I would probably bet on Ohio State at this point. I just think Oklahoma may win out in the end.
Do you expect him to make a decision after these visits, or do you think this is something that could go all the way into the summer and even the fall?
I would be surprised if Nate ran it out to the fall. Because he's not a guy that's doesn't like the attention, but he doesn't seek it or anything like that. So I think when you'll see him probably go in the summer, I probably take his round of official visits, probably to at least these three schools. Maybe he'll have a fourth or a fifth one in there. And, obviously he can take even more than five in this new world. But I think it will probably be to those three. He'll probably come home for a week, sit down, think about it, and then have a decision. Like, I just don't see Nate dragging this out for a long time. And, like I said, I get the impression that Oklahoma has really made up some ground with his family and a lot of that, and understandably to some degree with just the addition of Jake. But I still think Oklahoma's doing a better job with Nate, and I think they're starting to build a little momentum.
Doesn't this seem, and maybe I'm completely wrong about this, probably, but doesn't this seem like a familiar position that Oklahoma fans have been in, whether you're going down into Houston or you're going into Dallas to try, or maybe even Austin to try to get that kid that he leans Oklahoma the entire way, and then at the end of the day, he ends up going to the place that's closer to home because of the familiarity, because of the connections back into the program, and maybe even simply for some of these kids that they just don't want to say goodbye to the people they thought they originally wanted to get away from.
Yeah, guys, I mean, think about just going back a few years to a very notable recruitment, but Brock Vandegrift, guys,
Sure.
like he was going to leave, he was gone. And then spending, New Year's with his family, he just kind of sat back and said, I don't want to be that far from, I think it was his grandfather, was the reasoning that Brock really talked about. And obviously, Georgia's an outstanding program, makes all the sense in the world. But it was, a pretty happy accident for Oklahoma to have Caleb Williams fall in their lap from that situation. But it's just one of those things where you see this a lot. And I know, again, if he picks Ohio State, I know you fans are just going to be ready to burn it all down and be upset and those kind of things, but just let's just see where it all plays out. Like I think because this is one of those recruitments because of the connections to the family, because of all that. I think Oklahoma can continue to be in that race all the way to signing day. And at that point, anything can happen with a guy that has this much that ties him to a homeschool program like OU is in this case.
I think the last time that we had a recruiting report, we were talking about Oklahoma making some inroads in Houston and how not necessarily unfamiliar territory, but a region of Texas that Oklahoma hasn't had a lot of success. An entire state that Oklahoma hasn't had a lot of success in, Arkansas. Coincidentally, I guess we should say. It does seem like there are some inroads being made, though, over in Arkansas.
Yeah, guys, as a guy that's done this for over 20 years now, I can remember recruitments dating back to like Peyton Hillis and Matt Jones, some great Arkansas names that Oklahoma came within inches of being able to reel in and just couldn't quite get it over the hump for whatever reason. So you go back to basically the start of the Bob Stoops era. Oklahoma's landed two guys from Arkansas in Stacey Wilkins in 2019 and Trey Norwood in 2017. Now, very different outcomes. Trey Norwood had a very nice career. Stacey Wilkins was the big recruit that everybody wanted, and obviously it never really materialized in Norman. So, kind of a mixed bag as far as production, but Oklahoma has a chance now to match that two-person total in one class where, and I've talked about this in some recent scoops. Marcus Wimberly, the recent safety offer, was formerly a Michigan commitment for those that kind of want to know about his credentials. This is a guy that Michigan staff that now is almost unanimously coaching defensive football in the NFL. They offered this guy early on and saw some real potential there. The other being a Marion Robinson, another kind of safety hybrid type of guy that I know Oklahoma's been very big on since very early in his recruitment. Sounds like he may come down to Oregon and Oklahoma. So it's a deal where he is Oklahoma's not having to recruit as much against the home state Razorbacks, but obviously going to have to fight another recruiting monster in Oregon and who kind of presents different challenges. But I like where Oklahoma is for both of these guys, kind of like what I was saying earlier with Nate Roberts. If I was to pick right now, I think Oklahoma leads for both of these guys. And, talking to Marcus, you talk about a dude that fits Brent Venables like to a T. This is what he wants. Like just a guy that, all the stereotypes, coach's kid, hard worker, very faith-driven kid, like all the stuff that we would associate with Brent, that's Marcus Wimberly. And I just really like where OU is. I would say he's a guy that I could put a prediction in and feel pretty comfortable with it right now. And then with Amari and Robinson, doesn't talk a lot, kind of quiet, kept to himself. But when he does talk, he gushes about Oklahoma. Like he is very kind of will give me one really good response and then I won't hear from him for a week. But that one response, you're like, okay, that tells me something. And I know, like I said, talking to people in Arkansas, the impression around Fayetteville is very much that this is Oregon and Oklahoma.
There's good football in Arkansas. I mean, I lived there for 4 months, so I don't know a ton about it.
Talk about it quite well, too.
Yeah, no, I did not enjoy my time in Little Rock, but I know that there's good high school football in the state of Arkansas. Maybe not always the most elite guys, but most of those guys, Josh, don't they usually stay home, and they're usually ending up in Fayetteville.
Yeah, Arkansas does a very good job in state of reeling guys in. Now, and I also think they're pretty particular about who they do and don't pursue. They're not a school like some of these schools do a great job in state because they offer everybody, and so everybody just ends up staying in state. And you're like, that's fine, but half that class is dead weight on your roster. I think they're pretty good about being particular about, okay, this is a guy that can help us. This is not a guy that help us, and we're just going to have to make the tough choice here. But guys, it's a small state. And like you said, George, there's good talent there. It's not that different than Oklahoma as far as, any given year there could be anywhere from about 5 to about 10 guys in the state who are capable of helping Arkansas. So, again, for Oklahoma to be in the spot they are with these two guys, I think says a lot. And, again, I feel like we're almost getting to where we just spend these recruiting reports giving tribute to Brandon Hall, but both these guys are Brandon Hall recruits. Then you throw in Jonah Williams. I mean, he might have some of that, recruiter of the year conversation in 2025 if he can kind of keep some of this stuff up. So I I like the work they're doing, and I think it's easy to say, okay, Oklahoma's doing well in Houston, Oklahoma's doing well in Arkansas. But when you start looking at how it's happening and what's going on, I think it also says a lot for opportunism. Like we know Arkansas is in trouble. We know Sam Pittman, that there's some stuff there that says that this could be it. And so Oklahoma's saying, well, who in Arkansas could help us? Like what can we go do and maybe get a player or two that we wouldn't normally be able to? And that's what you have to do when you come from a state like Oklahoma. Like I said, that you can't fill your whole class out with Oklahoma guys, but you've got to go cherry pick at some other places. And I think that's kind of what's happening here.
Is this another product, too, of just simply being in the SEC and going to a kid and saying, yeah, you could stay here and play in the SEC, but you could also come, 120 miles or however far it is to Norman and play for just as good of a program and probably be a little bit more competitive? Is it just almost too easy to say that the SEC part plays any type of factor or any type of role?
I want to credit Eddie for being really respectful of Arkansas there. Just as good a program. That I think some OU fans are mad at you right now, Eddie. They're saying terrible things.
Well, I would say I don't want to piss off the former president Bill Clinton, but when he was on the list, we gotta cut all ties.
God.
Allegedly.
Well, there's that. I walked him into it. I apologize, everybody.
I just read news reports.
So, yeah, but there's no question that there's some aid from being part of the SEC. Because, guys, we're not just seeing it. Like, I know there was also another report, I believe, from our guy Chad Simmons about Isaiah Gibson from Warner Robins, Georgia. He's going to make an official visit to Oklahoma, along with, like, Clemson, Georgia, and Oregon. Like, guys that are visiting places like that in the SEC don't usually visit Oklahoma. I'm not saying never. I'm just saying it's not the norm. Sure. And for Oklahoma to be in that list, and again, for a guy that came in I believe he was the January 27th weekend, if I remember right. He's already been to Norman. He's coming back for a second visit as a big defensive lineman from Georgia. You want all those guys on campus that you can get, because unlike Arkansas, Georgia doesn't have any kind of, stranglehold on in-state recruiting, especially in the way you would think they do, in the way they both recruit and the success they're having. You can win in Georgia, though. We've seen a lot of teams do it. I mean, Clemson built a lot of their early success on big wins in Georgia, with both Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence being Georgia kids. So, I think that is something that is, of course, going to help. And like you said, Eddie, you can make the 2-hour drive over in some of these cases, and every year you go play LSU, you're going to be on pretty equal footing. Every year you go play just about anybody in the SEC, there's going to be enough talent on the field for Oklahoma to win just about any of those games. I mean, that's the way it is. And we know that's not a pitch that Arkansas can seriously make, especially right now. So I think that is something that you can win with, and I think maybe it eases that leaving the home state school when, hey, you're still in the SEC. You're still going to play all these big-time programs, and you still may play against some of your buddies, that went to different places.
It's quite the oddity. It's crazy that they've only had the two that you mentioned, Stacey Wilkins and Trey Norwood, and especially on the reverse side of things, when Arkansas has been able to go into Tulsa and recruit extremely well. Going all the way back to the Felix Joneses of the world.
Yeah, Felix Jones, Eric Bennett. I mean, you go down the list. We just saw AJ Green from Union. I think just transferred out this year. So and had some nice moments for Arkansas. So they've. I wouldn't say they've won a lot of head-to-head battles with Oklahoma, but they've won a couple, and they've done a very nice job in finding that next group in Tulsa that maybe OU didn't offer for whatever reason.
No doubt. Should be interesting to track. It's going to be ramping up here, though, as spring football starts. There's going to be a lot of spring high school football on the backside of college football, the spring ball stuff. So it'll be good. Camp season starting to trickle out there, isn't it, Josh?
Yeah, so for those that will wonder about coverage, March 9th is OU's, Future Freaks, like I said, we talked about earlier, the 2026 Heavy Junior Day. The next day in Dallas will be the Under Armour camp. So a lot of those guys are going to go up to Norman, and whether they're from Dallas or they're from Houston, they're going to stop in Dallas and go to camp the next day. And so we'll be able to put a lot of the guys on camera, talk to them, see them, have a lot of context for how that visit went beyond just, the standard quotes that we get out of so many of these visit weekends. So, yeah, you've got those coming up. May hit some 7-on-7, kind of depending on what the rosters look like for some of these events. But yeah, we're about back into it as far as spring ball. And then, as you guys know, every year in the spring, I'm going to see as many practices as I can around Texas and Oklahoma, and really try to gather as much as we can on, who's OU's really identifying in both 2025 and 26.
No doubt. We look forward to it. Josh, we appreciate it. Thanks for returning a reoccurring role here on the Soonerscoop.com recruiting report. George, I guess, thank you. Thanks for showing up to work today. All right, that'll do it. We'll talk to you right here next time. I think we are going to try. We'll have the Hoops Report. I know it's going to be depressing for a lot of people. They need to kind of figure their ass out. We are maybe angling to maybe do a little bit of stickball, though, with softball in full swing, a 62-game winning streak. It's ridiculous that we just talk about it like it's something normal. And a really good weekend for Oklahoma baseball, coming off of 2-1 down in Arlington with the win on Tuesday night in extras against Tennessee, as well as the come-from-behind walk-off winner on Sunday over Nebraska. Big one on Tuesday night against Dallas Baptist. So maybe have that to look forward to at the end of the week. And we'll be right here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. For Josh, for George, I'm Eddie. We'll talk to you next time.